So I'm here with Maxwell Maundy. The first time I got to hear of you was from a friend who uh, told me about what you're going through, and then I sort of Googled you. And when I Googled you, I found a lot of things against you, including threatening an MP and then ultimately being jailed. Can you tell us a bit of your story, how it all started, and how you got into the mess that you find yourself?
Okay. My case is actually one of the saddest cases you come across, and I think it's a complete miscarriage of justice in Britain. I was used for the good of this country, and it's rather unfortunate that the same institutions that use me in this country.
When you say you're used for the good of the country, what do you mean?
Well, it all happened in 2007 when I started my master's degree, MSc Financial Management at Middlesex University. My last resident permit in the UK expired in June 2007. Then in September, I started my master's degree. I had decided just to do my master's and leave Britain for good. So there was no need for me to even acquire visa. There were problems in acquiring visa. So I decided just to do my master's degree and then leave for good.
So you started your master's with like sort of no permit?
No permit. My permit ran out just barely 3 months before I started my studies. So I started a course in September 2007, and then on 9th October, as I was on my way to university, then I was arrested by British immigration officials. They took me home and then collected my passport and served me with deportation removals on that very day. So I was meant to be deported on 13th October 2007, which was Saturday. Then after I was released to go to the airport myself on Saturday, one of the arresting officers then started calling me, asking me to come and pay bribe for him to sell back my passport to me. So I took this matter to the British police. Then they decided they will use me as a bait and then trained me to do an undercover for them, which I did. And then they were able to arrest the corrupt immigration official with my assistant. Then after the arrest, they informed British immigration about what had happened. As a result, my deportation was cancelled, and I was told to remain here to assist in the administration of justice in this country. So from October 2007, the case went to court in September 2008. That's 1 year period. And within this 1 year, I was assisting the British Metropolitan Police Service with their investigation.
Around that time, what was your status?
I was still illegal. Okay. So the only thing, what happened was when they canceled my deportation, then they asked me to start reporting every week to British immigration, which I started doing right from October 2007. Then, during the 1 year investigation period, I helped the police assign bundles upon bundles of documents for the British police, and then copies were also given to the British Crown Prosecution Service. And then with my assistance, the court case began on 15 September 2008, and I was made to give evidence for 2 days in the court, British Crown Court, called Blackfriars Crown Court. And with that, the officer was convicted of bribery and corruption and was sentenced to prison for 3 years.
So at what point did the system turn around on you?
In the course of the investigations and everything, the first thing that happened was when they canceled my deportation. The police officers who I was working with then came to me and then said it would have been stupid on the part of British immigration if they had gone ahead with my deportation, because what would have happened is that they would have to fly me back to Britain to assist them with the case, because without me there was no case.
So they're sort of just using you.
using me. But you see, there were some other things. The very day I went to report the corrupt incidents to the police, that was on 10th October, the day after I was arrested. The police receptionist that I spoke to, what she said was, if it is true, the allegations I was making, if those allegations are true and the officer is arrested, she hopes British immigration will be sensible enough to reward me by granting me a stay in Britain. Then she invited a CID officer in charge of the district that I was in at the time, which is Barking and Dagenham. And when the CID officer came, what he also told me was, first he asked me, "Are you Maxwell Maundy?" I said yes. Then he said, "I understand you are making a very serious allegation against an officer. If it turns out that the allegations you are making are true, this is going to become a very big case. And if that happens, whatever is in my power to do and make sure you remain in this country, I will do so." That was the statement the police CID officer told me before he even started interviewing me about the allegations I was making that morning.
So none of these people were able to make good of their promise of assuring you that you get a stay. And then ultimately you were also in the news as threatening the MP for Barking. How did that happen, and how did it end?
After the court case, the police just abandoned me. But before the court case even started, the weekly reporting that I was meant to be doing, it got to the point and it became too much for me because of my studies, and I was still working, though illegal. I needed to survive. Even though they knew I was here for the sake of British justice, they had given me no means to survive. So I still have to carry on with my illegal working to survive, and my master's degree, assisting the police. I was even at the time doing a voluntary work for Age Concerned England. So it became too much. So in March 2008, I wrote to the British Parliament that if they could do something about my weekly reporting, or at least relax it, or even if they could give me some time off because of my studies, and I had my final exams approaching as well. So when I wrote the letter to British Parliament, it was handed over to an MP called Margaret Hodge, and she is responsible for Barking constituency where I was living at the time. So she took over my case and had been on my case for up to 5 years. So the thing with Margaret Hodge is, when the police finished with the prosecution, then they just abandoned me. All they told me is to keep in touch with my MP because they are the lawmakers and they know what to do in terms of my circumstances. So Margaret Hodge had been my MP and had been on my case. I've written letters upon letters to Margaret Hodge, and Margaret Hodge has written letters upon letters to British immigration and to me as well. But she seems not to have done her work properly.
As in
the letters, the mediation, and the letters she was sending to the Home Office, British immigration. Some solicitors even labeled it rubbish.
Because it was in the right tone.
Exactly. The tone of the letters were not appropriately worded. All she will keep saying is she's sending my letter to her, to the immigration, so that the key issues and points raised in my letter will be taken into consideration or into account for the right thing to be done.
So it was this frustration that made you to threaten her?
With the case with Margaret Hodge, it wasn't really that I genuinely threatened her. It's a build up of events, but obviously it's only when I have the chance to present my case before a panel backed by every letter and document and correspondence that had gone on between Margaret Hodge and I, that is only when everyone will know exactly what happens between me and Margaret Hodge, Right Honorable Margaret Hodge, that's the MP for Barking, who is also the chairman of the Public Account Committee at the House of Commons.
So, were you able to complete your master's?
It was hell. I did manage to complete it, but it wasn't easy. And I even had issues with the school. When I was in the school, I was chosen as the student leader of the MSc Financial Management program. And there were issues that came up in the course of my study as to the way some lectures were being handled, and I raised those issues during board of study meetings and a whole lot. And obviously that became a problem for some of the lecturers. There was one of the lecturers who became offended because of my complaints. Obviously the students were complaining to me, so I have to pass on those complaints to the academic board. But in the course of my meetings with the academic board, there was one of the lecturers who got offended because of the issues I was raising about the way he was handling the model. So in effect, he failed me for his model, which is corporate finance. So I did fail one of my exams. So in effect, I wasn't supposed to get MSc, but I took the case up with the Middlesex University Board, and eventually they decided to award me my MSc.
So you've been a fighter. I mean, from all angles.
Exactly.
And at what you were taken to jail. At what point did this happen, and why did it happen?
Okay. Now, from October 2007, when they arrested me and seized my passport, the only time I saw that passport again was 15th September 2008, the day the court case began. It was given me in the witness box to acknowledge if that was indeed my passport.
At that time, you were testifying against the
corrupt officer, exactly. Okay. And since that day, I never saw my passport again. So I had all these battles with British immigration after the court case, and to know, God knows, there was no solution. So my passport, my Ghanaian passport, spent 5 years, half of its lifespan, in the custody of British authorities. It then expired on February 2012. So after February 2012, I stopped reporting to British immigration. Then in March, they wrote to me again and asked me to continue with my weekly reporting. Then I wrote back to them and said, I've had enough. Please get my passport ready and deport me. And I gave them a specific date. That was 6th April 2012. And I called them and told them, please make sure everything is ready for me to be deported back to Ghana. And then that will be the end of the story. So 6th April 2012, I went to Heathrow Airport and followed my original deportation itinerary for October 2007 with the same ticket that they were meant to deport me with in October 2007. So I went to Heathrow Terminal 5 and presented my ticket and deportation document to British Airways check-in staff. Then they checked and realized the ticket was 5 years old. Then I told them, well, British immigration said it would be renewed for me to be deported. Then immigration, the airport immigration got involved, and the police and the security. Obviously, I had some placards. I decided that if things go wrong again, then I would do a demonstration at the airport. So the airport 2 incidents was very, very hard, and the police had to forcefully remove me from the airport and everything. Then again, I was reminded at the airport that they have even lost my passport. Way back in 2011, even before the April airport incident, there had been a letter, apparently a confidential email from British immigration to one of the MPs called John Cruddas, MP for Dagenham. I went to MP John Cruddas' surgery, and what he told me was that there had been a confidential email which seemed to suggest that British immigration have lost my passport. I got furious. I was really angry. So I told him to make a further enquiry. He then wrote back to British immigration about my issue with the passport. Then British immigration sent an angry letter telling me that I should pack my things, and then when I get to the airport, my passport will be released to me at the port of departure. So that day again, after I had gone to the airport on 6th April, to be told that they have lost my passport was the last straw that broke my heart. From that moment on, my fury knew no bounds. When I eventually came back home from that Heathrow on Good Friday, the 6th of April 2012, it was then that I decided enough was enough. Maybe it was time I start showing my inhumanity to the inhumane British authorities. It was from that point that I decided to chase British immigration, the Crown Prosecution Service, and the British police until they find my passport for me. I had a caseworker at the British Immigration Home Office, and I had been calling her time and again, and she kept telling me stories upon story. At some stage, she told me the police had confirmed they still have my passport in their custody, and she promised to get it back for me within a week. A week passed by, 2 weeks, still no news. And I called her again, and she said, oh, actually, they said where they put the passport wasn't there. When they went to check, it's not there, so it's gone missing. So, in fact, I wrote letters upon letters to British immigration. I even told them that if they have to burn Home Office, which is British immigration, to find my passport, they should do so. If not, I, Maxwell Maundy, I will burn down British immigration to look for my passport. It took them several months upon searches to eventually find my passport. And when they found the passport, they sent it back to me. And what they did to my passport was the least I expected. Having used me and my passport for free, I never expected them to have damaged my passport.
How did they damage the passport?
All the visas in my passport, the very last resident permit I had in Britain here expired in June 2007. And the passport itself expired in February 2012. Now, so for British immigration to send me my passport in somewhere May 2012, and to have gone ahead to even cancel the permits which were already expired in an already expired passport, to me, that was an act of cruelty. It was the last thing I expected from British immigration. So they cancelled the passport. They drew big red crosses inside the passport and had used red pen to write things in the passport. So in effect, they had rendered my passport useless. So though it's expired, it's a passport I have used to travel for years, and a very, very
when you say they made it useless, that means you couldn't even use it to be deported back to Ghana?
Well, it's expired. I couldn't use it to be deported. But assuming even I go to Ghana and I have a new passport and I try to apply to some other countries, of course I needed to show my old passport as proof or evidence of the fact that I have traveled abroad many times to Britain. But once I present this passport to any embassy in the world, immediately they will realize from the passport that I am a British deportee. So they had intentionally planned to render my passport useless as much as they can.
But isn't that the regular procedure they do?
I don't know if it's, even if it's the regular procedure, this passport is a different passport. This is a passport that sent a corrupt officer to prison for 3 years. So this passport should have been treated with decency, not like any other passport.
Okay. So at what point did you go back to
the threat? Okay, yeah. So when I received the passport with all these damages in the passport, then I decided to publish my story for the world to read. And I spent days and nights reading about Martin Luther King Jr. And what Martin Luther King Jr. said was, the question is not whether we will be an extremist, but what kind of extremist we will be. The nation and the world are in dire need of creative extremists. So I decided it was time for me to become a creative extremist. Now, there is something else that happened. What British government used me for and didn't do anything for me, they used somebody else for the same purpose, a terrorist, a convicted terrorist who had planned to cause carnage to Britain. He was used for the same thing I was used for, a prosecution witness. And that terrorist was given so many things. First and foremost, he was given an early release from prison. And the things that the same British authorities did for him that they never did for me, I couldn't believe it.
And who is this person?
Sajid Badat. The name is Sajid Badat. If you Google Sajid Badat, everything was published. He is one of the 2 bombers that were arrested. One was arrested as he tried to detonate his bomb in an American flight, and he's in American prison. The British counterpart, Sajid Badat, he was arrested in Britain, convicted and sentenced, and was in prison. But in order to convict the American counterpart, they needed to use the British one. So he was given an early release from prison. British police were paying for his mobile phones. He was working, receiving housing benefit, everything. He was treated like a human being, but I was treated like an animal. So I realized that in the minds of British people, they would prefer a terrorist to an illegal immigrant. So I decided to become a terrorist in Britain. That was why I wrote an article and gave it the title, I Want to Be a Terrorist in London. And people didn't understand. And I later had to change the title to, Is the White Man Worth a Pinch of Salt?
Where did you publish these articles?
On my blog, which is maxmoundy.blogspot.com.
Right, so we just ended up with you taking a position of wanting to be a terrorist, or at least threatening to be a terrorist. So at what point did you go into the prison, and you take us through a bit of the experience you went through as well? Okay.
The moment I published I Want to Be a Terrorist in London, or Is a White Man Worth a Pinch of Salt, it's usually I think one of the best articles I've written. So if you Google my name, Maxwell Kwaku Maundy, is the very first article that comes up. Is the White Man Worth a Pinch of Salt? The moment I published that story and I sent copies to the British authorities, then the police launched a campaign to arrest me. So the British police started, they were trying to track me down, but I wasn't aware. I was even distributing leaflets of my publication. I went to the Olympic Park. I distributed some copies. One day, the place I was living as at the time I started the publication, because the residents were scared seeing the article that I published, I had to move away from that house. And barely 3 days after I've moved, the British police went and raided the house. So I was told that the police had come to raid the house, and apparently they said they had been trying to track me down for a long time, but they have been unsuccessful. So I kept on publishing, and then I went on to publish other articles with the title, The White Man is an Asshole, And I even started blogging the searches the police were doing for me. My uncle's house became like a police station. The house was put under 24-hour CCTV police surveillance. Each time a black person goes into the house, it won't take long. The police will come and knock on the door. So, and I kept even blogging their searches and everything. I decided to teach them a lesson, and I wanted them to spend so much money. Now, one thing, when they were using me for the court case, on the day we were going to court, I told them I did not want to appear in person. They had promised me screens earlier on. But on the day of court, they said we couldn't do screens, so I have to go in person. I refused because of fears for my safety and security. And what they told me that day was that the British government has spent hundreds of thousands of pounds for the case I initiated to have come to a Crown Court. So if I refuse to testify in person, then they will lose their case and all that money will become a waste. And so for them to have used me for a case I initiated and even help administer the needed justice, which cost hundreds of thousands of pounds, and they're not doing anything for me, then I decided I will cause them to spend more money. So when they started searching for me, I was happy they were searching for me. And I prayed to God to shield me from the British police. And God did exactly that. So they spent almost up to 1 year searching for me. Raids upon raids upon raids. So finally, after all the searches and the extremist articles I was sending to number 10 Downing Street, to the British MPs and my own MP, Margaret Hodge, who became a subject of my court case, they did everything they could, but they were not able to arrest me. But whereas I had been living a normal life, even working illegally, driving, doing everything, and I even kept telling people that British police have been looking for me, but they are blind not to see me. So finally, I decided to bring it to an end. And then on 30th May, I personally went and handed myself over to the British police.
Okay, so you turned yourself in and then they started prosecuting you. What charges were leveled against you?
Yeah, I went to the police station on Monday, 13th May, about 4 p.m. and then told them, well, I am wanted, so here I am. And then they took me in, and then I was locked in the police cell overnight. Then the next day we had an interview, and then when we had the interview, I had a solicitor. Then after the interview, the files were sent to the Crown Prosecution Service. So later, I was told that they have decided to charge me. So they raised 5 charges against me. One was a bomb hoax. And then another one was stirring up a racial hatred. In fact, the bomb hoax, it did happen. When I decided to teach them a lesson and then give them cause to spend more money, I was working in a place called Tesco.com. Croydon branch. Croydon is the place where British immigration headquarters is, and I was working there with a stolen identity. So on my last day, when I stopped working, the final day, the day I had wanted the police to arrest me, I went to the Tesco where I was working and then distributed some of my publications to staff. And then I told them, actually, the police have been looking for me, so they will come to the place that morning. But I want them to know the truth, that I'm not a bad person. So when I finished and then drove my car out of the working place, Tesco, I went and parked my car somewhere, and then left the keys and everything with a friend. I then called the police and told them that, well, they have been looking for me. Then they said, yes, where are you? And I said, okay, let me reveal myself to you. I then told them that I have been working in Tesco.com Credit with a stolen identity as Justice, the very justice that they used me for. So I told them I've been working in Tesco.com as Justice. And as a matter of fact, I just left the place and there is something in my locker which they need to attend to immediately. So then they hurried up, and it wasn't long, and the place was flooded with police, both British undercover police and then uniform police. And I was hoping that day they will come and arrest me, because once they go to the my place of work and they get my car registration number, they will be able to trace my car to my address where I was living, and then at that point they will come and arrest me. But I waited that whole day. They couldn't come. 3 days, until I myself personally went and handed myself over. So the bomb hoax was one of the charges, and another one was stirring up racial hatred with my publications. So we had 5 charges in all. But on the morning of Wednesday, the 15th May, when they first sent me to a magistrate court, Red Bridge Magistrate Court, when we went, I realized they have dropped the bomb hoax, so it was left with just 4 charges. Then I had a barrister, and he said it would be better for the case to proceed to a Crown Court for a jury to hear the evidence of the case. So the case was then transferred to the Crown Court, which is Snaresbrook Crown Court. So when we went to the Crown Court, I had a plea bargain with my legal team, and apparently they were not happy with the stirring up racial hatred, causing racial anger. My legal team were not happy, so we decided not to enter a guilty plea to the racial hatred. So we went for guilty plea to the 3 charges, leaving the racial hatred. Then when we met in court, the prosecution said they needed 2 weeks to consider the plea. So it was adjourned for 2 weeks. We came back and they said, okay, they have accepted our plea bargain. So we had 3 more. So we were left with 3 charges. And one of the charges has a maximum of 5 years. And that one, though I had already pleaded guilty to it, the judge refused that one. So when we met on 30th September, the judge refused that charge. And then we have to come back on 2nd October for the case to be heard. And then it was revised to a lesser charge, which has a maximum of 2 years. Then the case again had to be adjourned for 2 days, because the judge said he needed to consider the sentencing options. And then I was sentenced on Friday. But because the case wasn't a trial, we only had a hearing. We entered a plea, so it wasn't a trial. So there were a whole lot of missing link. The judge did not understand so many things. There were things he didn't understand. He doesn't understand where the MP had to come in, or why MP received threatening letters. Even when the prosecution read Martin Luther King Jr.'s quote that the question is not whether we will be an extremist, but what kind of extremist we will be. The nation and the world are in dire need of creative extremists. The judge did ask the prosecutor if that quote is from Martin Luther King Jr., but the prosecutor said he doesn't know whether it is Martin Luther King Jr. or not. And then we proceeded. So there were things the judge didn't understand, but obviously he understood the fact that I have been used for the good of this country. And the judge even said that as soon as the court case was over, what the British police and the Crown Prosecution Service used me for, as soon as the case was over, the judge said Britain should have granted me an indefinite leave to remain from the day the court case finished. So he's really surprised that the authorities did not give me a stay, and things have gone on badly until this point in time. So eventually he sentenced me to 8 months imprisonment. But by the time the case finished, I had already spent 4.5 months in remand. So he ordered my release. He ordered for me to be released that very day. But unfortunately, I still had to be taken back to prison because of the very immigration that I even help, the very immigration that I did an honor to in this country, they still had a hold on me, so I was still liable to go back to prison.
So how long did you spend?
So but the time the court case finished, I had spent 4.5 months. Then I went in for another 1 month. So I spent 6 months, almost 6 months in prison. And the prison experience was really hard. It was hard. In the first place, it was hard for me to understand the fact that the very institutions that used me in Britain, that is the British police and the British Crown Prosecution Service, are the very same institution that had now put me in prison. So it was hard for me. And there were many things that, I have a history of headache. And or rather, unfortunately, the headaches came back and as worse as it could ever be. And it's a headache I even had treatment for at the Accra Psychiatric Hospital in 1998 before I went for my final SSE exams. And even at the time of treatment, the medical team of the Accra Psychiatric Hospital had taken a decision to write to WAEC, West African Exams Council, to have my SSE deferred from 98 to the following year. But I told them I didn't want it, so I decided to write it regardless of the headaches and the problems and the treatment that I was even receiving at the Accra Psychiatric Hospital for my headache at the time. So the prison was hard, the headache came back, and even as a non-smoker, I was locked up with smokers in the prison, and it was really terrible.
So when did they release you?
30th October.
That's 2000 and
this year, so barely last month. Yeah, it's even less than a month.
Cool. So after releasing you, what is now your status?
Well, they released me without a status. When the officer who came to my cell and told me Maundy home. Well, I was told when I get to a place in the prison, I'll be told my bail conditions. A place called the Triangle. When I got there, they told me I'll be told my bail condition when I get to the reception. I got to the reception. I was only given a statement of account and made to sign for it. And I was given whatever money I had in my prison account. That was it. Then they said I should go home. So I wasn't given any bail condition. So I have been released, still illegal immigrant.
And so currently, what's your status? What are you doing? Where are you? Do you still want to go back to Ghana?
I had something else in prison. That is God's visitation. And right now, there have been many things in this country, in Britain. There have been cases, there have been times when people have called for amnesty in Britain. Even during the last election, it was a heated political debate. Some political parties were calling for amnesty to be granted in Britain. Other parties refused. And the current government, which is a coalition of two parties, the Conservatives and then the Liberal Democrats. The Liberal Democrats, who are in a minority, have always supported amnesty in Britain. But the Conservative, which is David Cameron, the Honourable Prime Minister's party, have always refused an amnesty. And what I've been through in this country, and since I was released, still as an illegal immigrant, right now, what God has placed on my heart is to call for amnesty. And I've decided to use myself as a case study and call on the British government to grant amnesty to illegal immigrants. So I am preparing a very comprehensive letter, which I will name my blueprint to amnesty. And in that letter, I will call on the British government to grant amnesty to illegal immigrants in Britain.
And also, you're still Ghanaian, very much Ghanaian. And what is your call to the Ghanaian government?
With the Ghanaian government, there are issues we need to tackle, especially the way our high commissions function. I don't think it's working properly at all. Now, there had been a time when my previous immigration solicitor had wanted to solicit the assistance, the involvement of the British High Commission in my case. They wrote
the Ghana High Commission.
Ghana High Commission. They wrote a letter to the Ghana High Commissioner. They sent letters upon letters to the Ghana High Commission, calls upon calls, but they never got anywhere.
Did you yourself make any attempt to contact you?
It got to a point my solicitors were asking me if I was really a Ghanaian. So at that point in time, I got offended and decided it was time for me to write to the Ghana High Commissioner. So I wrote to the Ghana High Commissioner myself. And that was when they now wrote back to me and said I should tell my solicitors to now contact them again and tell them what they expect them to do. And from that point, the Ghana High Commissioner did send a letter to the British immigration, to the British authorities. And to be honest, it's a very, very nice letter, very well written by the Ghana High Commissioner. And it was sent to the British government and then copied. After the Ghana High Commission sent that letter, they made no more attempts, no more effort. I even personally wrote back again to the Ghana High Commission asking them that does it mean they will not follow up on the letter that they have sent to the British authorities? And that was it. They made no more attempts. And I think the way our High Commissions function overseas is really, really sad. And even in my letter, I did mention the case of 2 British teenagers who were arrested at the Kotoka International Airport for drug smuggling. And whatever assistance they received from the British High Commission whilst they were in prison. We read all of it here in London, in the UK. We even heard the fact that food and clothing was sent from British High Commission to Nsawam prison for those British teenagers, people who were caught in mischief, people who were caught in drug smuggling. But even with their mischief, their High Commission was fully behind them. And I think the way, I don't think it's only the case of Ghana. I think it's all African High Commissions. They have to properly restructure and look at how they handle cases involving their nationals in overseas, especially those who have been involved in problems of a sort.
And so finally, what should we expect from Maxwell Maundy? You're obviously fighting for the amnesty cause, like you said. If it doesn't go well, what are you doing in terms of even working? You're still in the UK. What are you doing? Stuff like that. And should they expect a book or something from you?
A book is definite. Even when I was in the prison, they were calling me a writer. And one day, even in the court, my barrister had always been impressed with my writing. And he even told me that, Maxwell, in fact, I'm not getting enough money from your case, but it's hard for me to leave your case for those that will pay me money because I'm enjoying reading your letters. One day in court, I told my barrister that I've written a book. Then he said, don't tell me, Maxwell, don't tell me. I know, not 1, not 2, not 3. You've written a lot of books. I have some copies here. I'm only worried that when you start publishing them, you write something bad about me. So as for a book, it's definite. And if I should write a book, I have, in fact, to be honest, I wrote my first book in prison. And before I came out of prison, I've been thinking that the moment I leave prison, I'll start looking for publishers to publish my book. And the title will go along the lines of The Heart of Darkness, something in that line. Then my second book will be my faith in God, which is The Amazing Grace. But when I came out of prison, why I decided to even now do the amnesty thing is, I think that is what God has placed on my heart. So I'm believing God for a miracle, that God will grant amnesty to all illegal immigrants in Britain. And that includes myself, my 2 uncles, 2 friends, and a lot of Ghanaians as well. So I think I'm asking Ghana, the Ghanaian government and all Ghanaians to back me with their prayers that we could ask for amnesty to be granted in Britain, and I hope that God will do that.
At a point, I mean, you took your passport, you went to the airport, you're willing to go home. That's no more the case for you. Why don't you just go home and end all this?
You see, now I've realized God has a purpose for me. So it's not about me deciding to go home. Even for years, I've been asking British immigration to deport me. Even when they arrested me, they bought me a ticket to deport me. And how come they couldn't deport me? I think God has a purpose for me. So it's up to God to decide where He wants me to stay. So for me, I'm ready. If Britain still want to deport me, fine, I'm happy. I'm not angry. I'm not angry with them at all. All I'm asking is God's will to be done.
All right. Thank you very much, Maxwell. And hopefully somebody out there is going to watch and obviously join your cause and also support in whichever way you can achieve what you intend to do in the long run. Thank you very much.
Thank you also, and God bless you.